The new KEF Q3 Meta was loaned to me by the manufacturer, retails for about $799 per pair. Specs are it's a two-way design with a 1-inch vented aluminum dome tweeter with matte absorber, 6.5-inch aluminum cone mid-range bass driver. Sensitivity is spec'd at 87 decibels, impedance 4 ohm. Recommended amplifier is anywhere between 15 to 150 watts, and it is a ported design. It also comes in with a weight of about 18.1 pounds for each speaker. It's actually a pretty robust speaker, I would say. Looking at it compared to the previous models that I've tested from KEF in this series, of the Q series, it definitely feels a little bit heavier, a little bit more sturdy in that regard. So, hey, that's kind of cool. As far as looks go, it's really nothing to write home about. It's just a basic rectangular enclosure with the nice coaxial in the center. Let's talk about pros first. Overall sound of the speaker is very enjoyable. In fact, when I was listening to it, I was actually surprised at a couple things. One being the radiation pattern width. So it's a pretty wide radiation of about plus or minus 60 degrees. Personally, that's my sweet spot. Now, previously in the past with other KEF speakers, I've noticed that their radiation pattern was a little bit tighter at about plus or minus 50 degrees. So when I fired these up, pointing them directly at me, I was surprised pleasantly that is a little bit wider than normal. So that gives the soundstage a little bit more breadth. Some of you may like that. Some of you may want a wider radiation pattern, and some of you may want a more narrow radiation pattern. It's really up to preference. So plus or minus 60 degrees is what I like. How do you know what you like? Listen to some of the speakers that I reviewed and then look at the data and figure it out. Hey, this data says its radiation pattern is about plus or minus 40 degrees and it's pretty constant, or maybe it's narrowing through the top end. I like that, or I don't like that. And just start narrowing things down. That's the great thing about data. It makes your life a lot easier, and then you can pick and choose the things that you like the most about a speaker's design and then buy that based on that knowledge without just guessing out of thin air. Settle it down to about maybe 2 or 3 different designs, order them from your dealer or somewhere where you can have a good return policy, and then pick the one you like the most and send the other ones back. It's that easy. That way you're set. Besides having the wide radiation pattern horizontally to give you that soundstage width, it also has a wide radiation pattern vertically at about plus or minus 60 degrees again. Now, this is because it's a coaxial design, and it's a good coaxial design with the tweeter baked into that mid-range rather than sitting out above that mid-range. And that mid-range driver acts as the waveguide for the tweeter that's far inside. Most two-way designs, which is what this is, will have the tweeter above the mid-range. And when they do that, there's a vertical separation in the sound field from that speaker. Usually there's a hole, and it usually occurs around 2 to 3 kilohertz where the crossover is. And that makes the radiation pattern vertically pretty tight. And usually it's around maybe 15 to 20 degrees vertically. So you've only got a 15 to 20 degree vertical window to work in. Now, if you're sitting at the normal or at a standard sweet spot, right? Like you're typically not moving left or right, up and down, then the vertical radiation pattern isn't really an issue. But let's say that you like to walk around the room, or you have these in a living room set up and you have entertainment and things like that in that living room. Or in my case, I have a kitchen. And so I usually will cook in the kitchen while I'm watching television or something like that. Or the alternative is you have a home theater where you have variable rows, right? So you have the first row and second row, and the second row is going to be maybe a foot or two higher than the first row. And you want to make sure that everybody's hearing essentially the same sound. The only way that you're really going to get that is you go with a really good three-way design, which is going to have a vertical radiation of about maybe plus or minus 30 degrees. And that's usually the best you're going to get. Or you go with the coaxial design and you get about plus or minus 50 to plus or minus 60 degrees vertically. The other thing I like about the speaker was the mid-bass punch. And initially I thought, man, these speakers dig really low. And then as I got through like the second and the third track, and I'm listening to Michael Jackson's Thriller. Typically that's what I go to. And I have a whole lot of other albums and songs that I choose to listen to. And if you're curious, I have a whole video on the songs that I listen to and why I listen to them and what I listen for specifically. If you're interested in that, I'll try to remember to link it in the description below. But I'm listening to Michael Jackson's Thriller, and the thing I like about that album is that it's got a lot of nice kick drum to it. So as I'm listening to that, I'm thinking, wow, this speaker has a lot of kick to it, around that 40 to 50 hertz. And I'm looking at the size of it, and I'm thinking, well, there's no way that it's really digging down to 40, so it's probably just 50. Then I get to the next track, and I think, well, is it actually getting 50 hertz or is it 120 hertz? Because usually what happens is If it sounds like you have really solid kick drum impact, it's usually going to be between 50 to 60 hertz, or it's going to be the harmonic from 120 to maybe around 100 hertz, somewhere in that ballpark. So you have to ask yourself, like as a critical listener, what is it that I'm actually hearing? When I looked at the data shows me two things. One is they do extend down to about 50 hertz, but after that, they roll off pretty quickly. So I thought, well, it could be that. But the other thing is that it shows me a nice elevated bump around 120 hertz. In terms of accuracy, that's not an accurate speaker, right? Like I recognize that. But in terms of preference, I like that. And that's been a common theme for all my reviews. If there's a nice little bump around 100 to 120 hertz, usually it's about maybe plus 2 decibels or so is enough to make me go, oh, that's nice. And even in my own car audio system, I give that area a little bit of a bump because what it does is it kind of fakes that 50 to 60 hertz area a little bit. And you don't have to have as much excursion out of your woofer to get down to 50 hertz. And you alleviate some of that compression and distortion artifacts from that particular low frequency area, that 50, 60 hertz, by having 100 to 120 hertz bump. It just gives the perception of more kick. The timbre of the speaker overall is quite nice. The other thing that I did notice was that there seemed to be a little bit of detail or clarity or attack lacking from the speaker. And sure enough, when I look at the data, I see that. I'm going to show you what I mean when I say it's in the data, but I also want to go through some of the cons. And luckily, there's not a lot, but they're there. Okay, so there is some pretty strong cabinet resonance at about 2 different frequencies. I'm going to show you that in the data. Out of curiosity, I took the speaker apart, and there's really little to no stuffing or damping inside the enclosure, other than some batting that's kind of rolled up in the corners. So what I did was to take the speaker enclosure apart, take the driver out, and use about a half a pound of this Acoustica stuff from Parts Express. This is like $12 for a pound bag of this. I stuffed it inside the enclosure, and then I retested to see what it looked like. The resonances were mitigated, but they were still there enough to cause some issues in that mid-range area between about, let's say, 800 hertz or so to 1 kilohertz. The question that I had for myself is, could I hear that difference? Because the thing about it is those resonances are high Q, but they're all within about plus or minus maybe 2 decibels or so. And so I'm thinking, well, because they're high Q and they're all relatively low in amplitude, it looks hideous on a graph, but just knowing what I know about the relationship between high Q resonances and audibility, thanks to Dr. Floyd Toole and his book, Sound Reproduction, I recognize that maybe I'm not hearing that. So I took the enclosure that I modified, I took the speaker that was unmodified, I set them right next to each other, and I did ABX blind testing. And out of 3 rounds of testing for a total of 24 tests where I had no idea which one was playing, I couldn't reliably pick which one was modified and which one was basic. The reason for that is because we just don't hear those high Q resonances. So even though it looks terrible on a graphic, your ability to hear those resonances is greatly diminished. Now, I'm not saying that you wouldn't be able to hear that, but I'm telling you that I wasn't able to hear that to a degree that I can confidently say it's a real problem. The other con to the speaker is that it is not ideal for high output. And you'll see that in the data as well. The concern that I had was at higher output, above like 90 decibels at 10 feet away, I ran into compression issues where there was some strain in the upper mid-range between about 1 to 2 kilohertz. So what does that mean for you? Well, I would say that if you're planning on using these for a high output home theater system, probably not your best bet. Certainly not without a subwoofer. Even though they dig pretty low into about 50 hertz in room, you're still going to have a subwoofer. And that high output compression and distortion that you're going to get from these is probably going to be a problem for you. Now, what I can recommend these for is if you're using these at reasonable volume levels, maybe not above 90 decibels at 10 feet away or the equivalent of that. Or maybe you're using these for stereo and you're not listening to them crazy loud. If you wanted to use one of these for a center channel, you could even do that as well. Just make sure you high pass it with the subwoofer. And again, you are going to be somewhat volume limited. You can also use these as rear surrounds or surrounds otherwise. And in that case, you're not having as much signal sent to these speakers. Therefore, the high output issue isn't really a concern. My recommendations for listening to these speakers is ported mode. In ported mode, they sound fantastic. If you stuff the ports with these little bungs that they come with, it's going to really diminish the output capability. It's going to basically put the roll off into the low 100 hertz region. I wouldn't bother with that. Not unless you absolutely are going to use a subwoofer, cross it above 100 hertz, and you want to put them right next to a wall. Otherwise, stick with them in ported mode. Put them about 1 foot off the back wall. And if you don't know what I mean by that, here's a graphic example. When I say off the back wall, I'm talking about from the back of the speaker to the wall behind the speaker. Putting these near the wall is something that most speakers don't take well to, because most speakers are tuned a little bit differently to where they roll off, usually around let's not say a frequency. Let's just say when they hit their roll off point, they roll off steadily at about 18 decibels per octave or 12 decibels per octave, depending on if it's sealed or ported or the tuning of the port. That's kind of typical. But what these have is an extended bass shelf port tuning, which means that it starts to roll off and then it kind of has a knee and then it rolls off more steep. This is done so you can put the speaker closer to the wall without it sounding resonant or boomy. And I'm going to show you what I mean in a graphic example shortly. I also do recommend pointing these directly at the listening position. The reason for that is because they sound really good pointed directly on axis, and they still have a wide soundstage radiation in terms of width. Most of the time, if you point a speaker directly at you, you're going to suffer in soundstage radiation, but you're still going to have a nice top end. That's with most speakers that behave pretty linearly, as these do in the top end. In black, I had the speaker pointed directly at the listening position, 0 degrees on axis. In red, the speaker is towed out at about 30 degrees off axis, facing away from the listener. When you do this, you roll off the top end. So if the speaker sounds bright, normally you would turn it away from you. Or if you want a wider soundstage radiation, you turn the speaker away from you. But with this speaker, if you turn it 30 degrees off axis and face it straight out into the room, you're going to lose some top end. You are going to get wider radiation, but in my opinion, that's not completely necessary. But I'm letting you know this because this is going to be up to you, and it's going to depend on your room to some degree. So, no pun intended. So I would just say to play around with that, but my recommendation is probably to point it directly at you or maybe just slightly off axis a little bit. But I wouldn't really recommend going too far off axis because I don't really see a benefit, in my opinion. Let's talk about the data. The data that you're about to see is captured using the Klippel near-field scanner, which provides me anechoic data of a speaker without having to use a $1 million or more anechoic chamber. I can actually get away with getting anechoic measurements in my garage, as you see in this video. The reason we want anechoic data instead of just some random person's in-room measurements is because it separates the room from the speaker, or should I say the speaker from the room, and provides us with what the speaker is doing before you place it into the room. And with this data, we can understand how best to set up the speaker, how far to bring it out from the wall, how best to aim it, where your eyes need to be or ears need to be relative to the tweeter, where the reference axis is, because some manufacturers won't even tell you how to set up a speaker. They'll just like, here you go, you paid $1,000 for this pair of speakers, you figure it out, right? And you need some guidance to set up these speakers in the best way possible. So that's where the data really helps. The impedance plot shows two pretty strong resonances, one around, about 350, 370 hertz, and then another one around 600 hertz. Minimum impedance is about 3.7 ohm. Here is the on-axis linearity. You're about -5 to +3 decibels. So why -5? Because that sounds terrible. All right, well, that's right here. That's this area right here. Now, frankly, I don't know what's causing that. As I said earlier, I took some polyfill or some acoustic stuff, stuffed it inside the enclosure, and that really filled in this 600-700 hertz area right there, but it didn't do anything for this. I'm not sure exactly what's causing this issue, but this is what I was really curious about. Would I hear a difference? So I took some equalization. I put high Q boost right through here and try to flatten it out to some degree. I didn't hear a difference. I don't recommend you boost signal going to a speaker, but as part of this testing at moderate volume, it's fine. And in my opinion, it's not worth worrying about. Ultimately, what winds up happening is your ear kind of just hears this little bit of a trough through here, not so much this extreme dip. Average sensitivity is at about 84.5 decibels. F3 is at 52 hertz, F10 is at 37 hertz. Now, I talked earlier about that mid-bass punch around 50, but then also said maybe around 120 hertz. So let's look at the 50 hertz roll off right here. So we see below 100 hertz, this response is starting to fall off. Now this right through here, if I were to draw a line right through here, would be pretty typical of a ported enclosure or a sealed enclosure, depending on the tuning. But what happens is when you get to around 50 hertz, you kind of get a little bit of a bump right here. That's what's called extended bass shelf tuning. And what this does is it gives you a little bit more output right here without having a lot of the output right through here. And that allows you to put the speaker close to the wall that's behind the speaker without it sounding too boomy or resonant. Here's the CEA 2034 data set. The more linear the blue and the red is, the better chance you have to equalize a speaker, among other things. But the reason I focus on equalization is because a lot of people will buy these speakers and then use them for home theater, or maybe they want to tweak a sound to their liking, and you need to know, can I do that with this speaker? If you were to see a big dip right through here, then that would indicate that, no, you can't equalize that because there's some directivity issue, and most of the time it's going to be a two-way speaker design where there's a tweeter and then a mid-range below it. With a coaxial, especially with KEF's coaxials, you have typically really good directivity. So with this speaker, you could equalize the response and come out pretty all right. And if you're curious what the response looks like in sealed configuration, here you go. So I'm gonna switch back to ported. Notice the bottom end because that's really the only thing that changes here. And then sealed again. So you can see the sealed rolls off pretty quickly below maybe about 120 hertz or so. This is the estimated in-room response. And this line indicates how I heard the speaker in my listening room. So extended bass shelf permits close to wall placement without sounding boomy. I've already talked about that. Bass hump around 120 hertz gives the impression of more impact. Already talked about that. Some loss in attack between about 1 to 2 kilohertz. I talked about that. But we also have good matching at various angles depending on how you aim the speaker. Here's the horizontal contour map, about plus or minus 60 degrees. What about vertical? Plus or minus 60 degrees as well. This is what I talked about previously. Harmonic distortion at 86 decibels and then at 96 decibels at 1 meter. So you can see at the higher output, you start to increase and you get above that 3% threshold that I typically like to say, all right, this is the area where you start to be a little bit more concerned. In terms of multitone, this shows some issues around 1 to 2K, and I'm pretty sure this is what I was hearing when I was playing the speaker above 90 decibels at 10 meters away in my living room. If I stay below about, I'd say below 90 decibels, it's this gray line right here, and that's pretty reasonable. Or below about 80 decibels or so, that's this gray line right here. So in terms of total output capability, this speaker is limited, and this gives us a good indication of why that is. If you use a subwoofer, what happens? You get this. So I'm gonna go back to full range and then down to an 80 hertz crossover with the subwoofer. Really not a lot changing. There is some difference, but it's not a lot. And then dynamic range compression testing that I provide, we see that, yeah, this speaker's got some problems. At 102 decibels at 1 meter, it's going pretty wild. Basically, it's losing its control or excursion capability around here, and it's going up and down in terms of distortion and compression. Now, if we stay at 96 decibels at 1 meter, the compression is limited to within about 1 decibel. Enhancement is limited to about 1 decibel. So again, this graphic also indicates that there's going to be more problems if you're trying to get really high output out of this speaker. And that does it for this review. If you found this helpful, please give me a like. That definitely helps out with the algorithm. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, as always, leave them in the comment section and I will do my best to answer them when I can. This is not my day job. I work a regular 40-hour week day job, so it's often hard for me to answer every concern or criticism that someone may have, but I do try. If you'd like to help out this channel and you want to support it, you can do so one of two easy ways. One is join me at patreon.com. There I provide behind-the-scenes information, polls, and some other neat stuff from time to time, even like garage sale type stuff for my patrons. Another way is to use any of my generic affiliate links to Amazon, Crutchfield, Best Buy, Target, Newegg, Samsung, and there's a few others. They're all in the description below my video. If you go and click that, they're generic affiliate links, so just click the link, go search what you're looking for, and buy it. That earns me a small commission at no additional cost for you. And no matter what it is that you want to buy, doesn't matter if it's new pajamas, I don't know, cereal, it doesn't matter. Anything helps. Projectors, speakers, televisions, home goods, whatever. You can buy it through those generic affiliate links, and that does help me out with earning a small commission again, at no additional cost to you. I appreciate your time. I will talk to you later. Take care. Peace.